Chapter 1 in the Burden and Bird textbook is an overview of what is to come in the remainder of the textbook. It's an overview of the students and the diversity that will be in your classroom, how you're teaching lessons, how you are integrating content and utilizing instructional strategies to meet the needs of all students and their learning styles. An effective teacher, based on what is discussed in Chapter 1, teachers have to plan their lessons, they have to implement or present their lessons, and then they have to assess students to determine what was learned and if they need to go back and do any kind of reteaching. So in planning your lessons, you need to make sure that you are connecting to the standards, that you have objectives that are based on Bloom's taxonomy, that you have a beginning, middle, and end, an introduction, an anticipatory set, which is like a hook. You're hooking the learner so that they're getting excited about the lesson, good closure, and then an assessment. So an assessment it can be quizzes, tests, portfolios, work samples, projects, reports, journals, models, presentations, demonstrations. There are a variety of formative assessments, and then you have the summative assessments also, which you will be learning more about in your assessment course this semester. So the chapter also talks about teacher characteristics. Teachers need to have knowledge, skills, and dispositions. The knowledge are those facts about content that you're going to teach your students. You need to have professional knowledge. You need to understand schooling and education in general. You need to understand how children learn. So this is going to be based on philosophy and theory, such as Chapter 1 in the Burden and Bird text is an overview of what you're going to be learning in this course through this textbook this semester. It really is based on the students and diversity that are going to be in your classrooms and how children learn and how you are to plan and present and assess learning. So the textbook talks about effective teaching and what makes an effective teacher. And part of this is teachers have to plan, they have to implement their lessons, and then they have to give assessments so that they can understand where their children are, what they've learned, and if they need to do any reteaching or work one-on-one with children or something like that. So planning is your written lesson plans. You have to make sure that you have your objectives, your standards, objectives based on Bloom's taxonomy. You need a beginning, middle, and end. So the beginning is kind of, it's like an anticipatory set. You hook the learner and get them engaged in the lesson. And then you need to have closure. Make sure that you have some way to close out. A lot of times teachers use some type of assessment, a ticket out kind of assessment at the end of a lesson. Examples of assessments are portfolios, work samples, projects, reports, journals, and so on. And these are those formative assessments. You also have summative assessments, which are usually at the end of a unit or like a 9 weeks or a 6 weeks or at the end of the school year. Teacher characteristics. Teachers need to have knowledge, skills, and disposition. So knowledge, you need to understand the content that you are teaching these children. Professional knowledge, you need to understand schooling, education in general. You need to understand how children learn. Piaget, John Dewey, Vygotsky, child development, those kinds of things, those kinds of theorists and philosophers. You need to understand diversity, how children learn, make sure that your classroom is representative of all the children that you have in your classroom. You need to have professional ethics and responsibilities. You also need to understand the pedagogical aspect, teaching methods, how you're actually going to get the knowledge, the information across to the students, and make it engaging so that they are understanding and listening to what is being taught. Pedagogical content knowledge are the strategies, the instructional strategies that you use. You need to have a variety of instructional strategies, some hands-on, some group work, some independent work, maybe centers, and then techniques that are unique to the different subjects you're teaching. And then skills. Teachers need to have skills. You need to know the content. You need to be able to instruct so that students are understanding and learning the content. You need to understand students, the age level that you're teaching, and you need to understand assessments. And then dispositions are really important. What are your values, your commitments, your ethics? Are you a caring person? Are you fair? Are you honest? Because, children see if there's some kind of unethical behavior going on in the classroom. So this is an example of a short range, just a lesson plan. This is from page 10 of your syllabus. So you are going to be writing several lesson plans that are included in a unit plan, and this is how they're broken down. So you have the title of the lesson here. You're not always going to have all of this specific information, but for this class and for some of your other classes, you're going to have more information on your lesson plans. Once you're actually in a classroom teaching yourself, you may not be writing such detailed lesson plans. But for now, we ask you to write lengthy, more detailed lesson plans because we want you to process the information and really kind of understand what needs to go into a lesson. So in your lesson plans, you always need to have your standards, your college and career readiness, South Carolina standards. You need to discuss why or write why this lesson is relevant. Why do students need to know this? What skills will they use this knowledge in their futures? And how is it actually relevant to students' lives? The more you connect to student backgrounds, the more they're going to be able to connect to your lesson. Any vocabulary that you feel like students don't know, you can add that into the lesson somehow. Your objectives are using Bloom's taxonomy verbs. So if you state the student will, try to use more higher level verbs, not just the students will know or the students will understand, but verbs like the students will create or experiment or classify. So they should be clear, measurable verbs that indicate what the students are going to do to demonstrate that they've learned the skill that you're teaching. And then your assessments are included. Anytime you write lesson plans, you need to make sure that you attach any assessments. Don't just say, I'm giving a test. You need to actually show, you need to have the full assessment included with your lesson plan. And then any materials, resources, or technology that you're going to be using in this lesson plan needs to be included. And then you have your introduction, which is your hook. How do you get the students excited about the lesson? And then your step-by-step procedures are next. And then you have your closure. How do you close out the lesson? Sometimes it's just a review. Sometimes they write a sentence about what they learned. You may have some activity that kind of reviews what was learned in the lesson. There's lots of different ways to close out a lesson. Differentiation is you need to provide opportunities to accommodate for individual student needs. So for each, you identify the student with specific needs, you explain the need, and then you tell how you plan to address that need. And then accommodations, how will you accommodate the needs of students? And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a future video and discussion. There's also some handouts in the additional documents to read to help you understand accommodations and modifications and differentiation. So any extensions that you're going to have for higher level students that are learning at a faster rate, and then modifications, how are you going to modify the content of the lesson so it's appropriate for the ability of your students. So this is just a sample beginning of a lesson plan. So I just kind of came up with this. Where do you live? That's my title. This is for grade 2. My content area and topic is social studies. My standard, I got it from, this is just a link to the social studies 2nd grade standards. So my standard is identify the geographic location of the U.S. in relation to the rest of the world. And then this indicator is developed to encourage inquiry into the location of the U.S. on various maps and globes. It promotes further inquiry into bordering nations and oceans. So that came strictly from the standards page. My objective is the student will analyze, and see my verb here is more than just the student will learn or the student will know or the student will understand. So they're going to actually analyze information from a variety of maps about the location of the U.S. and describe it using surrounding features and cardinal directions. So I asked the question, what assessment could you create to meet the objective? So I want you to just stop the video for a minute and think about what kind of assessments could you create to meet this objective. This is Bloom's taxonomy action verbs. So when you're writing your objectives, you can reference this page. So if you get kind of like stuck using the student will understand, the student will know, and that happens a lot, you can reference this and it will help you to think more deeply about what you want your children to actually be learning in your class or in the lesson. So this is that earlier slide that I showed you with my Where Do You Live lesson for grade 2 and in social studies, and then the standard identify and compare significant historical events, moments, and symbols in U.S. history. So this indicator was developed to encourage inquiry into historical events, including figures, symbols, observances that have been important to the U.S. over time, as well as how they impact us. So my objective is the student will design a brochure inviting people who live in other countries to visit the United States, include historical events, moments, figures, and American symbols and observances. So I basically just took the standard and came up with an objective. What are they going to do to meet this standard? So I want you to think of what kind of assessment could you create to meet this objective, and that's pretty simple if you think about it. So they're going to design a brochure. What would your assessment be? Well, it would probably be you would give a grade on the actual brochure that they created. So I want you to stop the video for just a minute and write a learning objective using Bloom's taxonomy verbs based on this standard. So remember I talked about in the video discussing the unit plan. A unit plan, a lesson plan is considered short-range planning, but a unit plan is also considered short-range planning. Long-range planning is more of like an outline for a semester, like a half year or your entire year. And I'll have some long-range outlines, plans under the course menu in the document, additional document section if you want to take a look at some of those. So the definition of a unit plan It's an instructional sequence, a sequential plan of instruction. It integrates skills, concepts, and activities within the context of a theme. So this is what you are doing with your unit plan assignment that you're creating over the course of the semester. So it provides a framework from which to teach content in a meaningful, organized fashion. It can last from a week to 2 months. And then here are your elements of a unit plan. So these are similar to what you have in the unit plan that's due for this class. So this chapter also talks about reflective decision making. What does it mean to actually reflect? As teachers, as human beings, we reflect all the time. We think about things that we've done, things that we've said. So that's reflection. Reflection's a way of thinking about, for teachers, educational matters. Draw on education and experience to make decisions about what to teach, how to teach, and how to provide an atmosphere to support student learning. So after you teach or you're with students for a day, you're going to go home and you're going to reflect while you're in the shower, or you're going to make some notes in your journal or your lesson plan book. What do you want to do different the next time you teach this lesson? Or do you have a child who needs a little bit of additional support in an area? So this is reflection. Reflective practice. It's a problem-solving strategy that improves practice by reviewing routines and procedures and other aspects of the instructional environment. What are we reflecting on? We're reflecting on our dispositions, the objectives for a lesson, teaching strategies, effects on student achievement, what the effects of the lesson are, or the way we taught the lesson on student achievement. So examples of reflection: writing, thinking, speaking, observations, evaluations, videos, plans, student work, assessments, all kinds of ways to reflect. So the chapter also talks about how diversity impacts teaching and learning. So what is diversity? I really like this definition from Ferris State University. Diversity is the range of human differences, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, social class, physical ability or attributes, religious or ethical value systems, national origin, and political beliefs. So within your class, you are going to have a variety of children of different races, ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, religious backgrounds, and you have to always remember to treat every child basically equally. There has to be equity in your classroom. You can't treat a child differently because you don't agree with how their parents are raising them or something like that. And you have to make sure that your classroom, the books in your classroom library, the posters on your wall are all representative of the diversity that's made up of the students in your classroom. So this is going to affect how you teach and how children learn. Creating a classroom community where everybody gets along and respects one another. Okay, so this is the end of the video lecture on Chapter 1. You should be taking the quiz on Chapter 1 by the due date, and that is in Module 1 on the Blackboard page.